Today I wanted to talk about the Venom movie. Now, there are going to be minor spoilers in this review towards the end, just because I'm going to be talking about the potential of a Venom sequel, and I can't really talk about that without getting into this one very minor spoiler, and it's also really a very poorly kept spoiler. You know, everybody kind of knew this going forward and figured that this was gonna happen. I'll mention that too, but I'll give a spoiler warning before I start talking about that. If you haven't seen the movie yet, which you probably should just go ahead and watch it now. But the Venom movie it's been in development for a long time now, really, since like 2007. You know, I look at this as a movie like Jurassic Park 4 that's been in development since 2001. Just this decade long development that I honestly thought would never happen. There's been a lot of movies recently I thought we would never actually see, and kind of surprised when we did see them. Like Jigsaw, and more specifically Venom. A part of me kind of thought we never were going to get a Venom movie, since for a while now Sony's had a very hard time getting their stuff together. But yeah, they started working on this after Spider-Man 3, and I think back then they still wanted Topher Grace to be the lead in the Venom movie. Eventually they realized that wasn't going to work, because he was horrible as Venom, and that movie wasn't good at all, and it killed the Spider-Man franchise that they had going. And I remember back in the day they had, I was young, but I still remember they had big plans for Sam Raimi and his Spider-Man. They've always been talking about Sinister Six. They always want to do that. Spider-Man 4 was going to be I think it was going to be Vulture and like some weird Black Cat female Vulture hybrid Anne Hathaway thing. I don't know what that was all about, but then Spider-Man 5 was going to be Mysterio, and then I think Spider-Man 6 was going to be Sinister Six. Interestingly enough, they did with Spider-Man Homecoming, they had Vulture, and Spider-Man Far From Home, they had Mysterio. I guess at that point, those were the only two big Spider-Man villains that haven't really been used yet. But this getting off topic here. Specifically Venom. Venom was a character that I've been wanting to see on the big screen for a while now. I've always been a big fan of Venom, way back since, well, not 1994, but there was the 1994 Spider-Man animated series, and I saw some of that. They had like a multiple season arc for Eddie Brock and the symbiote. I believe it started in season 1 with just like a 2 or 3 part episode specifically for the alien symbiote. It's called like the alien costume or something they called it. And it dealt with Spider-Man getting the suit and eventually realizing that the suit's no good, and it merges with Eddie Brock, who vows to get revenge for whatever happened. And then I think in like season 3, which was like season 3 always subtitled Sins of the Fathers, something like that. In season 3, Venom returns, and it's Venom versus Spider-Man. Eventually Carnage shows up, and it's got like Dormammu's in it, and Baron Mordo, and Iron Man, and War Machine, and they're all like teaming up to fight Carnage, and I don't remember much about it. I remember I liked it very much. I've always liked the Venom character and the Carnage character, of course, too. And so I was definitely looking forward to this movie, and I'll say that I did enjoy this movie. It's not a perfect movie. It's not it's not the best movie I've seen. It's not the best superhero movie I've seen. But I'll also say it's not the worst superhero movie I've seen this year. That's gonna sound kind of crazy to you when there's so many when you think there's so many great superhero movies that came out this year, but it's not my least favorite of those, I'll say. And the thing that really worked well in this movie, in my opinion, was the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom. I feel like they really understood the nature of this character and how how they coexisted and how they worked together. It was almost kind of like a bromance, especially towards the end there when they finally like accept this situation, and they're not like going against each other. But I don't know. Overall I like the movie. Like I said, it's not perfect. I kind of view it as almost Batman Begins in a way. I know Batman Begins is much better than Venom, but I see Venom as being a setup for what could be a much better, really good sequel that could really focus on, a sequel character going forward. There were two big things about this movie that had a lot of people on edge, and it was no Spider-Man in the movie and the PG-13 rating. I'll say neither of those really bothered me. I knew a lot of people were acting like you couldn't do this movie without an R rating, and you couldn't do this movie without Spider-Man. I knew for a fact that those things that they simply weren't true. You can definitely do a Venom origin movie without Spider-Man, because Venom isn't key to his origin, so to speak. I mean, I don't think it's that necessary to have the symbiote go from Spider-Man to Venom. I think it's much more important to understand the relationship between Spider-Man and Venom than having Spider-Man be key in his origin. So, maybe if they have Spider-Man in a sequel, then it would be much better to develop that relationship instead of just having, you don't need him for the origin, but it is an important character, kind of like Batman and the Joker. You don't need the Joker in your very first Batman movie, but at some point in time you're gonna want to bring the Joker into a Batman movie and deal with that relationship that they have with each other, because it's one of the most key relationships for the character, just like Spider-Man and Venom. I would say the most important relationship with Venom would be this character Spider-Man. It's not the other way around with the Spider-Man, but. And the PG-13, I never really saw it as necessary either. A lot of people said that it should have been R, but I just didn't see that. If it was R, I would kind of be worried about it being a little too much. Sometimes they can tend to go overboard with an R rating. Like, yes, Venom can be violent and gory, but I wouldn't want it to be gratuitous. I want it to serve a purpose. He's still like biting people's heads off and impaling people with tentacle whatever comes out of his arm, and so it's still violent, but it's not gratuitous, and it doesn't really need to be gratuitous. And they could always go for an R rating with the sequel, which it's looking like they're not going to go for the R rating for the sequel, which is a whole nother thing I'll talk about later. But yeah, I like the movie. It's tough to say, really. It doesn't feel like the type of superhero movies that we've gotten recently. It feels more like late '90s, early 2000s superhero movie. It kind of feels like it could fall in line with the Sam Raimi movies more than the Tom Holland the Tom Holland movies. And also, throughout this movie, I was kind of thinking about how I could see this Venom interacting with other characters from the MCU. I hope that going forward, now that this is at least a financial success, that there might be more interaction, more connection between this Sony Spider-Man universe and the MCU. Like I mentioned, I would love for Spider-Man to be in a Venom 2. So I feel like I should just talk about the Venom 2 now. It's really the thing that I want to talk about most in this video. So there's gonna be minor spoilers in this, and it's really just one thing. So like, spoiler alert. Yes, I'm gonna talk about Woody Harrelson as Carnage. I feel like everyone knew this going forward, that we all knew he was in this movie. It's like, he's probably playing Carnage. And then it was rumored for a while that he was going to be Carnage in the end credit scene. And yeah, he's Carnage. Now, he's not my first choice for Carnage, but I feel like he could do a good job. The wig is kind of ridiculous. I wouldn't be surprised if they just shaved it for Venom 2, but Carnage, like I said earlier, I like the character of Carnage a lot. I think there's a lot they can do with this character going forward. And it's really interesting how they could proceed with this character. I could almost honestly see, not going full Carnage until like a Venom 3. And just like, what I would do is like a Venom 2 focus more on Spider-Man and Venom, their relationship, and then have Cletus Cassidy be kind of like a secondary thing in the background. Have him still be in jail throughout the movie, and then you could have Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy having these conversations, kind of like you would get with Silence of the Lambs. Maybe there's some other villain out there, and Cassidy is giving advice or helping in whatever way while still being creepy and insane like he is. That's how I would do it. And then in Venom 3, I would have Cletus Cassidy go full Carnage, and you could get Venom and Spider-Man teaming up to fight Carnage, which that is like the one thing I want to see most in a movie, is Spider-Man and Venom teaming up to fight Carnage. Like, I would be happy with just Venom versus Carnage, or just Spider-Man versus Carnage, but to see them team up to fight Carnage, that's what I want most in a movie. And we might get it, it might happen. I'm kind of leaning towards no with it happening, but because I'm kind of leaning towards no with Spider-Man even being in Venom 2 in the first place. Now, I mean, on that, we'll say, I think the Sony Marvel kind of deal they have going on with Spider-Man, I know that ends with Far From Home, so he'll be in the Infinity War sequel, and he'll be in Far From Home, and then it'll be the end. And we don't really know what's going to happen with Spider-Man, specifically the Tom Holland Spider-Man, after that point. Marvel and the MCU, they're going to want to keep Spider-Man going, so there might be some type of negotiation with Sony to keep this character going. Obviously, Sony could just completely end the deal with Marvel and bring Spider-Man into their universe. They could completely do that. I guess it would be up to Tom Holland if he wants to stick around and stay as this Spider-Man. Sign some 6-picture contract or something with Sony, get his own solo Spider-Man movies while still being in Venom. It's definitely a possibility. And we're not going to even see a Venom 2 until after Spider-Man Far From Home, which is next year anyway. So, I wonder if they're going to... I'm very curious how they're going to keep with the Spider-Man Home theme if they do a third Spider-Man movie. Because I've been thinking about that. I can't think of any any decent home-related titles for a third Spider-Man movie, but I don't know. It doesn't really have anything to do with this. And they've said that the sequel they said that a Venom sequel would probably be PG-13, which doesn't really surprise me. They don't want to. They don't really want to change too much of this movie, given how successful it was. And I'm a little on the fence of that. It kind of seems hard to do Carnage without an R-rated movie. I was fine with Venom not being R, but Carnage just doesn't. Carnage just doesn't seem right. PG-13, you know, there's certain characters you have to go R with. You have to go R with Punisher. You have to go R with Carnage. You have to go R with Deadpool. And then there's other characters like Venom that can work PG-13 or R. Like a Wolverine could work either one. Wolverine, Venom, I think. I had another one. I can't. Anyway, but and then honestly, I thought about the animated series, and that wasn't even, you know. I don't know what the TV ratings are, but it would basically have been the movie equivalent or the TV show equivalent of being PG, honestly. And it's true with a lot of these characters. You know, for instance, Wolverine. Like, yeah, he was best suited in that R-rated Logan movie, but if you look back to some of the animated series he's been in, they're really meant for kids, and he still works well in those series. I mean, he's not even stabbing anybody with his claws in those, but he's still working well. It's about understanding the character. So I have faith that they could do Carnage well in a PG-13 setting, because it's just about understanding the character of Carnage, you know, and Cletus Cassidy, that relationship, but then also the relationship between Carnage and Venom specifically. You know, it's really like there's four people in this. There's Eddie Brock, and there's Venom, and there's Cletus Cassidy, and then there's Carnage, and all four of these need to kind of play off each other in a certain and specific way. As long as they handle that well, I think that's all that really matters. And I will also say that I'm gonna be less kind and forgiving on a Venom 2, because now they're entering in territory that's going to be a little trickier for them, a little tougher, and I'm expecting more at this point. I want them to go up from here. I want Venom 2 to be like an X2 or a Spider-Man 2 or The Dark Knight, you know, Days of Future Past. Some of these great superhero sequels that we've had, it can fall in line with those. If this ends up just being Amazing Spider-Man 2 and this just bombs, I'm not gonna be happy with that. It's gonna take more going forward to get me on the side of this movie. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about the Venom movie. It's been a while since I've done a review. I've just been kind of doing daily Half-Life 3 updates for a while, so I think this went okay. Kind of like the Venom movie. Okay. Although I didn't enjoy this. I enjoyed Venom more than I enjoyed doing this. But I'll see you guys next time.